The year was 1962, and a middle-aged man stood in front of a modest building in Rogers, Arkansas, staring at what would either become his greatest triumph or his most spectacular failure. Sam Walton had just mortgaged everything he owned, borrowed money from anyone who would lend it to him, and bet his entire future on an idea that most people thought was absolutely insane. This wasn't his first rodeo in retail, but it might very well be his last. The sign above the door read, Walmart, and almost nobody believed it would survive past its first year. But here's what makes this story fascinating: Walmart wasn't supposed to exist at all. The company we know today as a retail giant that dominates the American landscape, employs millions of people, and generates revenues that exceed the GDP of entire countries, was born out of desperation, rejection, and a series of catastrophic failures that would have crushed most entrepreneurs. This is the story nobody talks about, the risky beginning that almost never happened, and the remarkable journey of a man who refused to accept defeat even when everyone around him said he should quit. Let's rewind the clock and start from the very beginning, because understanding Walmart's origin story requires understanding the man who created it. Sam Walton wasn't born into privilege or wealth. He entered the world on March 28, 1918, in Kingfisher, Oklahoma, at a time when America was still reeling from World War I and heading toward economic uncertainty. His father, Thomas Walton, tried his hand at farming, but the land wasn't generous and the money wasn't flowing. The Walton family struggled, moving from place to place, state to state, chasing opportunities that always seemed just out of reach. Young Sam watched his parents fight constantly about money. In his own words, they were two of the most quarrelsome people who ever tried to live together. His father was rarely home, always on the road searching for the next deal, the next opportunity, anything that might bring in a few extra dollars. His mother, determined to contribute, started a small milk business, and Sam found himself waking up before dawn to milk cows and deliver bottles to neighbors before heading to school and football practice. This wasn't character-building exercise for fun, this was survival, and every member of the Walton family understood that simple truth. The constant financial pressure, the moving, the uncertainty, it all shaped Sam in ways he wouldn't fully understand until much later. He learned that a dollar wasn't just a piece of paper, it represented hours of backbreaking work. He watched his father squeeze tiny profits from business deals and saw his mother build something from nothing through sheer determination and relentless effort. These weren't lessons from a business school textbook, they were survival skills learned in the real world where mistakes meant going hungry. To escape the tension at home, Sam threw himself into everything else. Sports, Boy Scouts, student leadership positions, anything that kept him busy and away from the fighting. He graduated from high school in 1935 and somehow managed to scrape together enough money to attend the University of Missouri. But college wasn't a vacation from work, it was just a different kind of grind. Sam delivered newspapers, waited tables for meal tickets, and did whatever odd jobs he could find to keep himself enrolled. The experience taught him something crucial: he could outwork almost anyone if he had to. In the spring of 1940, freshly graduated and ready to take on the world, Sam Walton got his first real job in retail. He became a sales trainee at JCPenney in Des Moines, Iowa, earning $75 a week. This should have been the beginning of a promising career, but instead, it nearly ended before it started. Sam was, by most accounts, absolutely terrible at the job. His bookkeeping was a disaster because he hated making customers wait while he fumbled with paperwork. His organizational skills were questionable at best. His boss actually threatened to fire him and told him point blank that he had no future in the retail business. Think about that for a moment. The man who would eventually revolutionize retail and build the largest company in the world was told he wasn't cut out for retail. His boss looked at him and saw failure. The only thing that saved Sam's job was his natural ability to sell. He had a gift for connecting with customers, understanding what they wanted, and convincing them to buy. That talent earned him an extra $25 a month in commissions, just enough to keep him employed despite his other shortcomings. Then World War II happened, and everything changed. Sam quit his job in 1942 and joined the U.S. Army. The military saw something in him that his retail boss had missed: leadership potential. They selected him for the intelligence corps, and he rose to the rank of captain. The army stationed him in Oklahoma, where he met a woman named Helen Robson. They dated briefly, got married on Valentine's Day in 1943, and by the time the war ended in 1945, Sam had a wife and a baby to support. Now here's where the real story begins, where the risks start piling up and the failures start mounting. Sam decided he wanted to own his own retail business. With a $20,000 loan from his father-in-law and $5,000 of his own savings, he bought a Ben Franklin variety store in Newport, Arkansas. This wasn't a smart investment by any measure. The store was losing money, hemorrhaging it actually. Millions of small stores had failed during the first half of the 20th century, and this one looked destined to join them. But Sam didn't know enough to be scared, or maybe he knew just enough to think he could succeed where others had failed. The lease he signed was absolutely terrible, and this is important because it would come back to haunt him in the worst possible way. The rent was 5% of sales, which sounded reasonable until Sam discovered it was the highest rate anyone had ever paid for a variety store. But the real killer, the detail that would eventually destroy everything he built, was that the lease contained no renewal clause. No option to extend, no protection for the tenant, nothing. When Sam's father-in-law found out, he was shocked. How could anyone be so careless? But the papers were signed, and there was no going back. Despite the terrible lease and the struggling store, Sam went to work. He studied retail conventions and then systematically broke every rule that didn't make sense to him, which was most of them. The Ben Franklin franchise required him to buy all his merchandise from company outlets, but Sam found a clause that let him source goods elsewhere. He discovered he could buy cheaper merchandise from other suppliers, slash his prices below what competitors charged, and make his profit on volume instead of margin. It was a simple idea, almost obvious in retrospect, but it was revolutionary for the time. The strategy worked better than anyone expected. In his first full year, sales jumped to $105,000, a 45% increase. The next year, $140,000. The year after that, $175,000, another 25% jump. The Butler brothers, who owned the Ben Franklin franchise, weren't happy that Sam was sourcing merchandise elsewhere, but they couldn't argue with the numbers. Sam was generating sales that nobody else in the system could match. Sam brought his brother Bud into the business, and together they ran the store even more efficiently. Within 3 years, Sam had repaid his father-in-law's $20,000 loan in full. 2 years after that, he was arguably the leading variety store owner in Arkansas and possibly the entire region. The business was thriving, his family was growing, 3 of his 4 children were born in Newport, and his wife Helen loved the community. Everything was perfect. And then it all came crashing down. Remember that lease with no renewal clause? The landlord decided he wanted the store for his own son. When the lease expired in 1950, Sam Walton was kicked out of his own business, the business he had built from nothing, the business he had poured his heart and soul into for 5 years. In his autobiography, Sam called it the lowest point of his life. He felt physically sick. He had done everything right, worked harder than anyone, built the best store in the region, invested in the community, and now he was being forced out with nothing to show for it except painful lessons learned. This is the moment that almost ended the Walmart story before it began. Sam Walton could have given up. He could have decided retail wasn't worth the heartbreak and gone into some other business. He could have let that failure define him. But instead, he got angry, and he got determined. He decided he would start again, and this time he would do it right. This time, he wouldn't make the same mistakes. He searched for a new location and found one in Bentonville, Arkansas, a tiny community that most people had never heard of. This time, Sam insisted on a 99-year lease. He wasn't going to let anyone kick him out again. In the summer of 1950, he opened Walton's Five and Dime in the town square. The locals whispered among themselves, placing bets on how long this outsider would last. 60 days, maybe 90 at most, they said. He doesn't stand a chance. There were already 2 variety stores in Bentonville, and neither of them saw Sam as a threat. But Sam had learned something crucial from his Newport experience: consistent low prices changed everything. When customers could count on finding the cheapest goods at his store every single time, they stopped shopping around. They came to Walton's first, and they came back again and again. The 1950s were boom years for America's economy, and Sam took full advantage. He kept finding new ways to cut costs and pass the savings to customers. Then he discovered self-service retail, a concept that was just beginning to catch on. Instead of having clerks fetch items for customers, why not let customers grab what they needed themselves and pay at the register? It seemed almost too simple, but Sam immediately understood the implications. Fewer employees meant lower overhead, which meant even lower prices. He implemented the system, and his income tripled in less than a year. With more money flowing in, Sam began expanding aggressively. He opened one store, then another, then another. By the end of the 1950s, he owned 15 stores, all acquired through a combination of borrowed money and profits from existing locations. He was successful by any reasonable measure, but Sam felt like something was missing. He was working incredibly hard but not making the kind of profit he thought he should be earning. The variety store model had limitations, and Sam could see them clearly. So he started thinking about a new strategy, something bigger and bolder and riskier than anything he had tried before. The idea was simple but radical: build large discount stores that slashed prices on everything, not just selected items, and place them in small towns that the big retailers ignored. By dramatically undercutting competitors on price, he could make up the difference through massive volume. It was already being done in cities, but those discount stores were small and only discounted specific products. Sam wanted to discount everything and do it in rural America where nobody else was looking. He needed backing, serious financial backing, because this idea required significant capital investment. Sam approached the Ben Franklin Franchise Company with his proposal, but they rejected it immediately. His plan required them to cut their wholesale margins in half to accommodate his low retail prices, and they weren't willing to do that. Other potential investors looked at his idea and saw disaster. Discount stores in small towns? It would never work. The population wasn't there to support it. He would go bankrupt within a year. Rejected by everyone, Sam Walton made the most dangerous decision of his life. He mortgaged his home, borrowed money from anyone who would lend it, and bet everything on his vision. In 1962, he opened his first Walmart store in Rogers, Arkansas. This was the moment of maximum risk, the point where everything could have collapsed. If the store failed, Sam would lose his house, his savings, everything he had built over the previous 17 years in retail. His family would be left with nothing but debt. But the customers came. They flooded into the store, thrilled that they didn't have to drive to the city for discount prices. They could get everything they needed right there in their small town, and they could get it cheaper than anywhere else. The sales numbers were encouraging, but Sam knew he couldn't relax. One successful store didn't prove the concept could scale. He needed more stores, more data, more proof that this model could work across different markets. Sam kept learning, kept adapting, kept pushing. He replaced wooden shelves with cheaper metal ones. He kept his stores open longer than competitors, generating more sales from the same square footage. He made sure every store had a large parking lot, and unlike some competitors, he never charged for parking. These seem like small details, but they added up to a significant competitive advantage. The problem was funding. Sam was expanding through a combination of profits and loans, but there was a limit to how much banks would lend and how much debt he could safely carry. By 1969, he had built something impressive, but he needed capital to take it to the next level. In 1970, Sam made the decision to take Walmart public. The initial stock offering raised about $5 million and allowed the Walton family to retain 61% ownership. That money paid off debts, cleared loans, and gave Sam the resources to execute his most ambitious plans. What happened next was extraordinary. Between 1970 and 1971, Walmart added 6 stores. Then 13 stores in each of the next 2 years. Then 14, then 26. By 1980, Walmart had 276 stores, and they were opening about 100 new locations every year. The growth was exponential, almost unbelievable, and it was all built on Sam's simple philosophy of giving customers the lowest possible prices. Sam attributed the success to more than just low prices. He made his employees partners in the business through profit sharing and stock options. He positioned stores near warehouses to enable one-day delivery and minimize transportation costs. He cut out wholesalers and bought directly from manufacturers, squeezing out another layer of markup. Every decision was designed to reduce costs and pass those savings to customers. By the end of the 1970s, Walmart had become the fastest-growing and most influential force in American retail. Investors who bought shares in 1970 saw incredible returns. One investor who put in $1,650 watched that investment grow to over $700,000 by 1987. Sam Walton, the man who was told he had no future in retail, had built something unprecedented. In 1983, Sam launched Sam's Wholesale Club, aimed at small business owners who wanted to buy in bulk. Once again, the concept was a massive hit. By 1990, Walmart had more than 1,000 stores and 150,000 employees. The company that almost never existed had become an unstoppable force. But success brought criticism. Small retailers accused Walmart of destroying their businesses, of using predatory pricing to drive them out of the market. Sam acknowledged the criticism but didn't apologize for it. He believed that customers voted with their wallets, and they were choosing Walmart because it gave them better value. Small stores were destined to disappear, he said, not because of Walmart but because the entire retail landscape was changing. Customers wanted lower prices and more selection, and they would shop wherever they could get those things. Sam Walton died on April 5, 1992, at the age of 74. At the time of his death, Walmart had annual revenues exceeding $104 billion. Today, the company has grown to over 10,500 stores worldwide and generates more than $500 billion in revenue annually. It employs over 2 million people, making it the largest private employer on the planet. But here's what makes this story remarkable: none of it had to happen. If Sam had listened to his JCPenney boss who told him he had no future in retail, Walmart never exists. If he had given up after being kicked out of his Newport store, Walmart never exists. If he had accepted rejection from the Ben Franklin franchise and other investors, Walmart never exists. If he had been too afraid to mortgage his home and bet everything on an unproven concept, Walmart never exists. The risky beginning that nobody talks about is the real story of Walmart. It's not a story about a genius who had all the answers from day one. It's a story about a man who failed repeatedly, learned from those failures, and refused to quit even when quitting would have been the rational choice. Sam Walton wasn't smarter than everyone else, he wasn't better connected, he didn't have more resources. What he had was an unshakable belief that he could give customers better value than anyone else, and he was willing to risk everything to prove it. The lesson isn't that everyone should mortgage their home and bet everything on a dream. The lesson is that massive success often comes from surviving massive risks that almost destroyed everything. Walmart's dominance today makes its beginning seem inevitable, but it wasn't. It was a series of desperate gambles made by a man who had been told he would fail, who had already failed spectacularly, and who decided to try anyway. That's the story nobody talks about, the risky beginning when Walmart was just a single store in a small Arkansas town, opened by a middle-aged man who had mortgaged everything he owned and borrowed money from anyone who would lend it. That moment in 1962 when Sam Walton stood in front of his first Walmart store, knowing that failure meant losing everything, that was the moment that changed retail forever. But it almost never happened, and that's what makes it worth remembering.